My family left me out of every wedding because I was too different. So when it was my turn to get married, I didn't invite them. But after my wedding photo hit the paper, they showed up at my door, angry and yelling. They say blood is thicker than water, but for 31 years, my family's love felt more like a cage, suffocating the very person I was desperate to become. And then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, it finally hit me. I was done begging for their approval. Done. The realization wasn't a crash or a loud, dramatic goodbye. It just settled quietly in my bones as I carefully traced a delicate fern onto a client's shoulder. Now, here I stand in my Portland studio, surrounded by a life I built, piece by beautiful piece, without them. Sunlight streams through huge floor-to-ceiling windows, scattering rainbows across my sketches. My teal hair, yeah, teal, catches the light as I lean over my workstation, arranging inks for the day. Everywhere, there are botanical designs. It's my signature style, the one that built my reputation and my waiting list. Delicate ferns unfurl across canvases, wild roses climb imaginary trellises, forgotten woodland plants find immortality in my art. My fingers, perpetually stained with ink, tap the appointment book. It's been 10 years since I traded Connecticut's suffocating perfection for Oregon's wild, embracing freedom. 10 years since I stopped trying to fit into the Brooks family mold and started carving my own. The contrast between my vibrant, chaotic workspace and the rigid household that shaped my childhood? It couldn't be more striking. Back in Ridgefield, Connecticut, our 4-bedroom colonial was a monument to respectability. The lawn was always meticulously manicured, hedges trimmed to identical heights, flower beds blooming in colors approved by the neighborhood association. Nothing grew wild there. Nothing was allowed to. My dad always Father Charles Brooks. He built his tax attorney practice on reputation and appearances. His tailored suits matched the polished veneer of his public persona. His handshake sealed million-dollar deals with families who trusted his perfectly combed, salt and pepper hair and steady gaze. At dinner, he'd dispense wisdom about what others think, as if it were scripture. Reputation is currency, he'd say, cutting his meat into precise squares, and the Brooks name is worth its weight in gold. My mom, Eleanor, to her friends, Mrs. Brooks, to everyone else, she chaired 3 church committees and orchestrated the annual charity gala. Her calendar was packed with social obligations, each one chosen to maintain or elevate our family's standing. She moved through rooms with practiced grace, her pearl necklace bouncing slightly as she laughed at jokes that weren't funny, from people she secretly despised. "Appearances matter, Delaney," she once whispered, pinching my arm at a garden party when I dared to reach for a second cookie. People are watching. Always, people are watching. My brothers, Derek and Lucas, completed the perfect family portrait. They were the golden sons, Ivy League futures mapped out from their cradles. Derek excelled at debate and went straight to Yale pre-law. Lucas, a math prodigy, collected academic scholarships like trophies before landing at Harvard Business School. Their achievements adorned our mantle and fueled my father's boasting at country club dinners. Me? I was the smudge on an otherwise pristine canvas. The daughter who asked too many questions, who colored outside the lines, literally and figuratively. While my mother carefully selected my dresses for Sunday service, and my father charted my path to an acceptable college, I dreamed in colors they couldn't even name. The Brooks family lived by an unwritten code. Every single decision, from vacation spots to breakfast cereal, passed through the filter of outside judgment. What will people think of us? That echoed through our house, bouncing off the pristine walls, settling into corners where dust never gathered because Mom wouldn't allow it. The first time I truly understood my place in that hierarchy, I was 12. After weeks of begging, I'd convinced Mom to buy me a temporary hair color, just a single streak of violet that would wash out after a few shampoos. I applied it myself, my hands trembling with excitement as the color bloomed against my brown hair. The result thrilled me, a small rebellion contained in a single streak of purple. I bounded downstairs, eager to show it off before Derek's high school graduation dinner. My father looked up from his newspaper, his expression shifting from mild distraction to utter disgust in the blink of an eye. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice as cold as a January frost. "Go wash that out immediately." "But it's just temporary," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "It'll be gone by Monday." I said no. His newspaper snapped back into place, a wall between us. "We're leaving for Derek's dinner in 30 minutes. You will not be joining us looking like that." "Charles," my mother interjected, her voice low, a warning. "People will ask where she is." "Tell them she's ill," he said, not even lowering the paper. "A stomach bug. Better they think she's sick than see her looking like some sort of delinquent." I stood frozen in the living room, his words settling over me like a shroud. It wasn't just the disappointment of missing dinner at Derek's favorite restaurant. It was the casual ease with which I'd been erased, excluded, all to maintain the family's image. Later that evening, alone in my bedroom, picking at a sandwich Mom had left, I watched through the neighbor's kitchen window. My family. They'd stopped at the Petersons' house next door before heading to the restaurant. They were laughing. Dad's hand clapping Derek's shoulder with pride. Mom's face animated as she spoke, Lucas smiling at something someone said. They looked complete without me. Perfect, even. I pressed my palm against the cool window pane, watching them exist without me, and something shifted inside. The constant hunger for their approval began to ache differently. Less desperate, more resigned. I realized then that their love came with conditions I might never satisfy, rules I might never understand. That night, as the violet streak faded under repeated washings, a seed of independence took root in my heart. Years would pass before it fully bloomed, but in that moment of exclusion, watching their laughter through borrowed light, I began to understand. Real family shouldn't require perfection to grant belonging. I just didn't know yet that I'd have to create that family myself, thousands of miles away from the pristine colonial on Maple Street. The first sketchbook I ever bought myself was a cheap, spiral-bound thing from the drugstore, paid for with birthday money from my grandmother. I hid it between my mattress and box spring, pulling it out only when my bedroom door was locked and the house had settled into evening quiet. With colored pencils spread across my comforter like fallen autumn leaves, I created worlds my family would never understand. By 16, my fingers constantly bore the evidence of my secret life. Graphite smudges under my nails, paint flecks that wouldn't wash away, calluses from gripping pencils too tightly for too long. Mom noticed once during Sunday dinner, her eyebrows arching toward her perfectly styled hair. "For heaven's sake, Delaney. Your hands look absolutely filthy." She passed me a napkin with 2 fingers, as if my smudges might somehow transfer to her manicured nails. "What will Pastor Mitchell think if he sees you like this at youth group tomorrow?" I didn't answer, just scrubbed at the blue pastel dust until my skin reddened. What I couldn't explain was how those marks were badges of honor, evidence of the only conversations where I truly spoke. My voice had been systematically silenced at the Brooks dinner table. Every opinion deemed inappropriate or unnecessarily contrary. Every question met with Father's signature phrase, "That's not up for discussion." So, I learned to speak through lines and colors instead. My drawings became the sentences I couldn't say aloud. In my room, surrounded by carefully hidden sketchbooks, I created entire universes, fantastical landscapes where trees grew upside down and gravity was optional. Portraits of women with fierce eyes and untamed hair. Abstracts that captured the tornado of emotions constantly swirling in my chest. Each page was a declaration of independence, a tiny revolution happening under their roof, without their knowledge. The summer before senior year, I discovered an online art forum. Trembling with nerves, I scanned and uploaded my first drawing, a self-portrait where my face emerged from tangled thorns, a single bird perched on my shoulder. I called it Caged. While my family slept, I returned to find comments from strangers around the world. "This speaks to me. Your line work is incredible. I feel this in my soul." I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep from crying out. For the first time in my life, someone was truly seeing me. Not the proper Brooks daughter in pressed khakis and sensible haircuts, but the real Delaney, wild and yearning and bursting with things to say. That night marked the beginning of my double life. Public Delaney maintained acceptable grades, attended mandatory family functions, and nodded at appropriate intervals. Private Delaney developed a distinctive style that incorporated botanical elements with surrealist twists, each creation branching and unfurling like a plant seeking sunlight after too long in darkness. Art wasn't just my hobby or talent. It became the very foundation of my identity, when everything else felt borrowed or forced. In those sketchbooks, I discovered who I actually was, beneath the Brooks family veneer. The college conversation began exactly as I expected, during a carefully orchestrated dinner the fall of my senior year. Father waited until dessert was served before clearing his throat and placing a Dartmouth brochure beside my plate. "I've spoken with William Harrison," he announced, referring to his college roommate who now served on Dartmouth's board. "He's assured me they'll look favorably on your application, despite your," he paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase, "despite your somewhat inconsistent academic performance." Mom beamed across her untouched cheesecake. "Economics would be perfect for you, Delaney, so versatile, and the Dartmouth campus is absolutely beautiful in fall." My brothers exchanged knowing glances. The family machine was operating precisely as designed, another Brooks child being fitted into their predetermined slot. What they didn't know was that I'd already applied to 7 art schools across the country, that I'd been selling digital illustrations online for nearly a year, building a modest savings account under my own name at a bank across town, that my portfolio had been reviewed and praised by working artists who found my vision compelling and commercially viable. I just nodded and took the brochure, letting them believe I was resigned to their plan. Meanwhile, my real applications traveled through digital space toward admissions offices that would judge me solely on my artistic merit. The San Francisco Art and Design Institute acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. I collected it from the mailbox before anyone else came home, my hands shaking as I read and reread the words that would change everything. Not only accepted, but offered a 75% scholarship based on my portfolio submission. For 3 days, I carried the folded letter in my sock drawer, taking it out at night to verify it was real. On Friday evening, when Father was particularly pleased with himself after winning a complicated tax case, I placed the letter on the dining table beside his coffee cup. He read it with mounting disbelief, his face transitioning from confusion to anger like storm clouds gathering. "What is this nonsense?" "My college acceptance," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "I start in September." Mother snatched the letter from his hands, her eyes widening. "San Francisco? Art school." She said the words as if they were obscenities. "Delaney, we've already discussed your future." "The Dartmouth application. I never submitted it," I interrupted, something I rarely dared to do. "I won't be needing it." Father's coffee cup hit the saucer with a sharp crack. "This is absurd. We are not paying for you to waste 4 years drawing pictures 3,000 miles away." I'd anticipated this exact response, having rehearsed this conversation for months in my head. Now the words came easily, without trembling. "That's fine. I've already earned it myself." I nodded toward the scholarship details. "And I've saved enough for living expenses." "The decision is made." The explosion was nuclear. Father's voice rose to levels that made the neighbors' dogs bark. Mother's tearful accusations of betrayal and ingratitude. Even my brothers emerged from their rooms to witness the spectacle of Delaney Brooks defying the family order. Throughout it all, I remained strangely calm, as if watching the scene from a distance. Their words, once so powerful they could shatter my confidence, now bounced off the armor I'd built through years of secret art and online validation. The next morning, I bought a one-way bus ticket to San Francisco. The journey would take 3 days, with transfers in Pittsburgh and Denver. 3 days to shed my old skin and prepare for rebirth in California sunlight. I packed methodically, 1 suitcase of practical clothes, toiletries, and a few books. My portfolio case held selected original drawings, my tablet, and external drives containing my digital work. Everything that mattered fit into 2 bags. No dramatic goodbyes disrupted my departure. Father had left for work without speaking to me. Mother remained in her bedroom with a headache. My brothers were conveniently elsewhere. The house felt emptier than usual as I carried my bags down the familiar staircase one last time. Outside, spring sunlight dappled the manicured lawn. I paused at the end of the driveway, turning to take one final look at the colonial house where I'd spent 18 years searching for approval that never came. The symmetrical windows stared back blankly, revealing nothing of the turmoil within. The bus rumbled away from Ridgefield's pristine streets, carrying me toward a future I'd designed myself. Through the smudged window, I watched my childhood home shrink and finally disappear around a bend. The tightness in my chest, a constant companion for as long as I could remember, began to ease with each mile marker we passed. For the first time in my life, I'd chosen art over approval. The road ahead was uncertain, potentially difficult, but it was mine. Completely, undeniably mine. San Francisco welcomed me like the family I never had. The fog rolled through the Golden Gate each morning, wrapping the city in a silvery embrace that felt nothing like Ridgefield's suffocating propriety. Here, green-haired baristas served coffee to suited businessmen without a second glance. Professors with full-sleeve tattoos lectured on classical techniques. The city pulsed with possibilities that expanded my lungs with each breath. "You're holding back," Professor Winters said during my first critique, tapping a weathered finger against my sketchbook. Her own arms bloomed with Japanese-style peonies that disappeared beneath her rolled sleeves. "These botanical studies have technical skill, but where are you in them?" The question rattled me. Where was I? After 18 years of shrinking myself to fit into spaces too small for my spirit, I hardly knew. My roommate, Zoe, dragged me to her favorite tattoo shop that weekend, insisting it was time for my art school baptism. The studio smelled of antiseptic and possibility. Walls covered in flash sheets showcased everything from traditional anchors to watercolor abstractions. "What do you want?" asked the artist, a woman named Morgan whose silver hair was cropped close on one side, flowing long on the other. I unfolded the design I'd sketched and refined for weeks, a single foxglove stem with blooms unfurling up my inner forearm. "These flowers are poisonous," I explained. "But they're also medicine, in the right dose." Morgan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I know exactly what you mean." The needle's sting brought tears to my eyes, but I welcomed the sensation. With each line etched into my skin, I reclaimed territory. My body, my choice, my permanent declaration of independence. When I returned to class Monday morning, I wore a short-sleeved shirt for the first time since arriving. Professor Winters noticed immediately, examining the healing tattoo with professional interest. "Now we're getting somewhere," she smiled. "Let's see how this translates to your work." The floodgates opened. My sketchbooks filled with botanical studies that merged scientific precision with emotional resonance. Nightshade and hellebore, plants with dual natures like mine, capable of harm or healing, depending on how they were handled. Professors began pausing longer at my station during critiques. My work was selected for the student gallery show, then for a local cafe exhibition. Phone calls home grew briefer, less frequent. "How are your business classes?" Father would ask, clinging to the fiction that I'd eventually transfer to a real degree program. "They're illuminating," I'd answer, technically not lying, as I mixed colors for a study on light refraction through petals. Dean Wallace stopped me after final portfolio reviews junior year. "Brooks, your botanical illustration work is exceptional. Have you considered scientific illustration as a focus? The medical school needs someone with your eye for detail." The commissioned work paid my summer rent and built my first professional portfolio. I framed the check stub from the university and hung it above my desk, proof that art could be both passion and profession, despite what my family had predicted. Father's Christmas card that year included a note, "Still time to transfer credits to business school." I tucked it behind my first published illustration in a medical textbook, two realities competing for wall space in my tiny apartment. Portland called me after graduation, a city where the wilderness crept right up to urban boundaries, where moss reclaimed abandoned spaces, and where Iron and Ivy, a tattoo studio specializing in botanical designs, had posted an apprenticeship opening. The owner, Rachel West, spent 30 minutes examining my portfolio before looking up. "Your line work is exceptional." The way you understand how plants grow, how they twist toward light, that can't be taught. She tapped a weathered finger against my foxglove tattoo. You already understand how skin becomes canvas. The rest I can teach you. Apprenticeship meant long hours sweeping floors, sterilizing equipment, and drawing flash designs for poverty wages. But it also meant absorbing everything: how to stretch skin for clean lines, how to move the needle for different effects, how to listen to clients who trusted me with their stories and skin. Why lilacs? I asked a woman in her 60s who requested the purple blooms across her shoulder blade. My mother grew them, she explained. She's been gone 20 years now, but whenever I smell them blooming, I feel her with me. Her eyes misted. I always want to carry her with me always. Each client brought stories etched into them before I ever touched needle to skin. The college student covering self-harm scars with cosmos flowers. The breast cancer survivor reclaiming altered terrain with cherry blossoms. The widower incorporating his wife's handwriting into a memorial piece. These weren't just clients. They became connections, people who trusted me with their pain, their healing, their transformations. I created a safe space for their vulnerability, something I'd never been offered at home. 2 years into my apprenticeship, my botanical designs developed a waiting list. For years in, Rachel called me into her office. "I'm opening a second location," she said without preamble. "I need someone I trust to be my partner at the original shop." She slid papers across her desk. 51% me, 49% you to start. We revisit the percentages in 2 years. At 25, I became co-owner of a respected tattoo studio. The day I signed the partnership papers, I called home for the first time in months. "I've become part owner of a business," I told Mother, careful with my wording. Her voice brightened. "Oh, what kind of business, dear?" "The kind that's profitable and respected in its field," I replied, still dodging. "Well, your father will be pleased to hear you finally found a sensible path," she said, satisfaction warming her tone. "Maybe you'll finally use that artistic hobby for proper greeting cards or something respectable." I let her believe what she needed to believe. The truth would only disappoint her, and I'd stopped seeking approval I would never receive. My own apartment was filled with plants and light. My skin accumulated more art. A garden I carried with me everywhere. Iron and ivy thrived under our partnership, featured in regional magazines and booked months in advance. Then came the ivory envelope in my mail, addressed in Mother's perfect penmanship. Inside, Derek's wedding invitation. Une gold embossed lettering announcing his union with Caroline Elizabeth Montgomery of Greenwich, Connecticut, at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, followed by a reception at the Ridgefield Country Club. A handwritten note slipped from between the cardstock. "Delaney, we hope you'll join the family for Derek's special day. Please wear neutral colors, long sleeves preferred, and avoid bright hair tones for photographs. Mother." The familiar ache bloomed beneath my ribs. 6 years of building my life, my business, my reputation, yet still reduced to a potential embarrassment. Still asked to hide who I'd become. Rachel found me staring at the invitation during lunch break. "Bad news." "Family news," I clarified, sliding the note toward her. "Apparently, I'm welcome at my brother's wedding as long as I pretend to be someone else." She read it, eyebrows rising. "What will you do?" The question haunted me for days. Part of me wanted to arrive in full glory, teal hair, tattoos on display, wearing the vintage silver sequined dress I'd found at a local boutique. Another part, the young girl still hungry for belonging, whispered that compromise might open doors to reconciliation. I booked my flight, packed the silver dress instead of the requested beige, arranged for my assistant to cover weekend appointments. I wore a sweater over my tattoos for the ceremony, but removed it at the reception, the silver dress catching light as I moved. Mother's tight smile told me everything when I arrived. "We've arranged seating in the back row, dear. For family photos? Perhaps you could stand behind your cousin Thomas? He's quite tall, don't look, see." I'd complied with half their demands, yet still found myself erased, seated where I wouldn't be noticed, positioned in photos where I could be cropped out later, introduced to distant relatives as our daughter who lives in Oregon, with no mention of my successful business. The pattern revealed itself with perfect clarity. Acceptance would always come with conditions I couldn't meet. Belonging would always require diminishment I couldn't sustain. On the flight back to Portland, watching clouds pass beneath the wing, I made a quiet promise to myself. The next celebration requiring family would happen on my terms, in my space, with people who loved all of me, not despite the colors and lines I'd added to my life, but because of them. A year later, another wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, glossy cream cardstock with gold lettering that caught the light as I turned it over in my hands. My brother Lucas was getting married to Vanessa, a pediatric surgeon with the pearls and cardigan wardrobe that our mother adored. I traced my finger over the embossed edges, searching for some hint of genuine connection in the formal wording. A smaller card fell from the envelope, an additional note printed specifically for me. The Four Seasons Boston maintains a strict dress code. No visible tattoos permitted. Please plan accordingly. I stared at those words until they blurred. Not, we can't wait to see you. Not, it'll be so good to have the whole family together. Just a clinical warning about my existence being incompatible with their carefully orchestrated event. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Did you get the invitation? Mom insisted on the dress code note. Of course she did. I considered my options while watching raindrops race down my studio window. I could wear long sleeves in June heat. I could cake myself in specialty makeup designed to hide who I've become. I could contort myself into their mold for one more day. I won't be attending, I typed back. Congratulations to you and Vanessa. Lucas called immediately. Delaney, come on. It's my wedding. I understand that, I said, keeping my voice steady, and it's a beautiful venue with rules that don't accommodate me. You could cover up for one day, he argued, for family. I glanced at the wildflowers blooming up my arm, each petal a milestone in my journey away from their suffocation. That's not something I'm willing to do anymore. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken ultimatums. Family events had become battlegrounds where my identity was the enemy. First, it was please dress appropriately for Thanksgiving. Then, maybe leave the nose ring at home for Christmas. Each invitation came with increasingly specific conditions for my presence. Mom and Dad will be disappointed, Lucas finally said. They usually are, I replied, and ended the call. Over the next year, the invitations dwindled. Thanksgiving dinner. Cousin Abby's graduation. Dad's retirement party. Each omission became a statement louder than words. I was being edited out of the family narrative, one event at a time. When the Facebook photos appeared from events I hadn't known about, a surprise anniversary party for my parents, a family reunion weekend, I realized I wasn't even being rejected anymore. I had simply ceased to exist in their world. The final blow came months later in a phone call from Aunt Sarah, always the family mediator. Her voice carried that special tone reserved for delivering bad news wrapped in false kindness. Delaney, honey. About Madison's wedding next month. Madison, my youngest cousin, who once followed me around with a sketchbook, begging for drawing lessons. The thing is, Aunt Sarah continued, they're worried about you influencing the younger guests. All those tattoos, your lifestyle choices. Madison's future in-laws are very traditional, and everyone thought it might be best if I didn't come. I finished for her, the words bitter but familiar. We all love you, of course, she added quickly. It's just that family occasions have certain expectations. I watched a customer through my studio window, admiring the botanical sleeve I'd finished last week. She caught my eye and gave a thumbs up, her face bright with the joy of seeing herself reflected in her chosen art. You know what, Aunt Sarah? I said, my voice clear and firm. You can all stop worrying. I won't be attending any more family events. Ever. Her stammering response faded as realization settled over me like morning light. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as contamination, a problem to be managed, a mistake to be hidden. That evening, I wrote one final email to my parents. Not begging for understanding, as I had so many times before. Not explaining myself or defending my choices. Simply stating that I was closing this chapter of endless rejection. My finger hovered over send as memories washed through me. Childhood dinners where my voice was silenced. Teenage years when my art was dismissed as a phase. The empty space at family photos where I should have stood. The reply came 3 days later, a single line from my father: "We think that's for the best." Those 6 words snapped something loose inside me. Not pain, as I expected, but relief. Like setting down a heavy burden I'd carried for decades. I'd been seeking approval from people who had no intention of giving it. The endless cycle of rejection wasn't a failure on my part. It was liberation. As winter approached, Portland welcomed me with open arms. In the mismatched furniture of communal art spaces and late-night conversations over cheap wine, Zoe, a violinist with silver-streaked black hair, invited me to a gallery opening my first week in town. "Fresh meat," she joked, linking her arm through mine as she introduced me to everyone. Garrett, a poet with kind eyes and scarred hands from years of construction work, showed me the best coffee shops for sketching. Fiona, who creates installation art from discarded electronics, helped me find my apartment with the perfect north-facing windows. None of them demanded explanations for who I was. None of them issued conditions for belonging. When Thanksgiving approached, I braced for the familiar ache of exclusion. Instead, Zoe texted, "Orphan Thanksgiving at my place. Bring whatever doesn't scare the health department." 23 people crowded into Zoe's loft apartment. Garrett brought 3 pies and his elderly father, who told ribald jokes. Fiona constructed a turkey from salvaged metal parts that became the centerpiece. Someone's band played improvised holiday songs with lyrics that made us howl with laughter. I looked around at these people, with their colored hair and tattooed skin, their loudness and their tenderness, their complete acceptance of each other's broken parts, and understood what family should be. No one asked me to be smaller. No one suggested I cover my tattoos. No one whispered about what others might think. When Christmas arrived, we created new traditions. A tree decorated with miniature art pieces we'd each created. A gift exchange where everything had to be handmade or secondhand. A feast where everyone contributed their family's comfort food, creating a tapestry of flavors that told our collective story. These people celebrated the very parts of me my biological family tried to erase. They asked questions about my tattoos instead of demanding I hide them. They framed my art instead of dismissing it as a hobby. In this warehouse studio, with its exposed brick and massive windows, surrounded by people who chose each other, I finally understood. Family isn't inherited. It's recognized. It's built. It's chosen. And I chose them. My first encounter with Caleb West happened on a rainy Thursday evening at the Evergreen Gallery's Spring Showcase, 4 months after Christmas. I stood beside my latest piece, an intricate back tattoo design transferred to canvas, when a tall figure with a camera slung across his chest approached, raindrops still clinging to his dark curls. "The texture here is remarkable," he said, leaning closer to examine the interplay of shadow and light. "You've captured something raw and honest. That's rare." I watched his eyes trace the lines of my work, noting the genuine appreciation in his expression. No performative enthusiasm, just quiet recognition. "I'm Caleb," he offered, extending a hand. "I document counterculture movements across the Pacific Northwest." "Delaney Brooks," I replied, taking his hand. "I put permanent art on people who want their outsides to match their insides." His laugh was unexpected, warm, and unguarded. That might be the best description of tattooing I've ever heard. As the gallery crowd ebbed and flowed around us, our conversation drifted from artistic influences to personal philosophies. Caleb's photojournalism focused on communities existing outside mainstream expectations: commune dwellers, sustainable living advocates, underground artists, people who'd found freedom in rejecting conventional paths. When the gallery lights dimmed, signaling closing time, he asked if I'd join him for coffee. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights as we walked to a small cafe 3 blocks away. "What drew you to tattoo artistry?" he asked, wrapping his hands around a steaming mug. I told him about my journey from Connecticut to Portland, the freedom I discovered in creating permanent art on willing canvas. He listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving mine. "Family?" he asked, the question hanging between us. "I built my own," I answered honestly. "Blood relatives are back east, wondering where they went wrong." He nodded, understanding flickering across his features. Chosen families can be more nurturing than biological accidents. Our conversation stretched past midnight, weaving through art movements, identity politics, and the communities we'd each constructed around ourselves. Unlike previous first dates where I'd carefully edited my narrative, with Caleb, I found myself offering unvarnished truths. When he walked me to my car, his hand briefly caught mine. "You know what I find most compelling about your work?" he asked, his voice soft against the night air. "Tell me." "Your skin tells stories most people spend a lifetime hiding," he said, tracing a finger lightly along the floral sleeve covering my left arm. "There's courage in that kind of transparency." The simple observation landed with unexpected weight. Not admiration for technique or style, but recognition of the deeper purpose behind my art, the commitment to visible authenticity that had cost me my first family, but given me the freedom to become myself. I agreed to see him again before we parted ways. Over the following months, our relationship blossomed through shared creative endeavors. Caleb photographed my tattoo sessions for a magazine feature on women transforming the industry. I designed a logo for his upcoming photography exhibition on alternative communities. We created naturally, without the friction I'd experienced in previous relationships. No explanations required, no apologies necessary for pursuing artistic obsessions or keeping unconventional hours. When I invited him to join my studio's 5th anniversary celebration, he arrived early to help arrange furniture and stayed late to wash ink cups. My chosen family, Jasmine and Marcus from the studio, Tori from the apartment upstairs, even old Professor Hammond, welcomed him without reservation. "He fits," Jasmine observed one evening after Caleb had left, her arms crossed as she leaned against the doorframe. "No adjustment period, no awkward navigation. He just belongs here." The observation struck me as significant. My previous partners had approached my circle cautiously, treating my friends as obstacles to overcome rather than people to embrace. Caleb integrated seamlessly, bringing homemade bread to Sunday dinners and remembering everyone's coffee preferences without being told. The contrast with my biological family's historical rejection of anyone I brought home was stark. My father had interrogated my high school boyfriend about his career aspirations, while my mother scrutinized table manners and pronunciation. My brothers barely acknowledged the existence of people I cared about. Caleb attended gallery openings and industry showcases, his quiet support never wavering. He documented my creative process with his camera, preserving moments of inspiration and frustration alike. When I received the Industry Innovation Award in June, his was the first face I saw in the crowd. "You're glowing tonight," he whispered during the after-party, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I'm happy," I replied, the simple truth of it surprising me. "It looks good on you," he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. We built our relationship on a foundation of mutual support and genuine acceptance. He understood my need for creative space and respected my boundaries without taking offense. I learned to accommodate his occasional retreats into silent contemplation without taking them personally. For our 1-year anniversary, Caleb suggested a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. We rented a small cottage overlooking the Pacific, windows open to capture the constant rhythm of waves against the shore. After a day exploring tidal pools and collecting interesting stones, we returned to watch the sunset paint the horizon in brilliant orange and pink. Caleb seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his hands fidgeting with the camera he hadn't used all afternoon. "I have something for you," he said as darkness settled around us and stars began appearing overhead. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box, hand-carved with delicate floral patterns. My heart stuttered in my chest as he placed it in my palm. "Open it," he urged softly. Inside nested a silver ring, its design immediately recognizable. A small wildflower pushing through cracked concrete. The exact image of my first tattoo. The one I designed myself at 19, marking my decision to leave Connecticut permanently behind. "The first time you showed me that tattoo," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the emotion flickering across his face, "you told me it represented resilience, beauty emerging from hardship." I nodded, words momentarily beyond reach. "That's what I see in you every day," he continued. "Not despite your past, but because of how you've grown through it. He took the box from my trembling hands. I want to spend my life loving your authentic self, Delaney. Every story, every scar, every moment of becoming. The ring caught moonlight as he held it between us. Will you marry me? In that moment, the weight of a lifetime seeking approval from people who would never give it fully disappeared. Here was a man who saw me completely, tattooed skin, unconventional choices, artistic ambitions, and offered not just acceptance, but celebration. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes! As he slid the ring onto my finger, the wildflower symbol pressing gently against my skin, I realized I'd finally found what my biological family had never managed to provide. Unconditional love, without performance requirements. We sealed our promise with a kiss as waves crashed against the shore, the sound of natural forces reshaping the coastline, a fitting backdrop to this moment of transformation. With Caleb, I wasn't fighting to be seen or struggling to be valued. I simply existed, fully and freely, in the circle of his arms. We stayed wrapped together under starlight, planning a future built on the foundation we'd already established, one of mutual respect, creative partnership, and the kind of love that doesn't require hiding uncomfortable truths. For the first time since leaving Connecticut, I felt completely at home. My engagement to Caleb wasn't planned with Pinterest boards or vision boards. It happened on a random Tuesday when we realized we'd built something neither of us wanted to live without. The moment he slid that vintage emerald ring on my finger, I knew exactly two things. I wanted to spend my life with this man, and telling my family would be the final test of everything I'd built since leaving Connecticut. Are you sure you want to tell them? Caleb asked, his fingers tracing circles on my shoulder as we lay in bed that night. We could just send them an announcement after. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. One last chance. I need to give them one more opportunity to actually see me. The next morning, I crafted the email with coffee-studied hands. No dramatic declarations or ultimatums, just simple facts. Caleb and I are engaged. We're planning a small ceremony in Portland in October. We'd love for you to be part of this new chapter in our lives. My finger hovered over the send button for 3 breaths before pressing down. The soft whoosh of the sent message sounded so mundane for something that felt like launching a flare into the dark Connecticut sky. Hope flickered briefly, a dangerous ember I thought had been extinguished years ago. Maybe this milestone would finally bridge the gap between who I was and who they wanted me to be. Maybe a wedding would matter enough for them to try. Mother's response arrived within hours, her words as precise as her handwriting. We would, of course, like to meet this young man before giving our blessing. Perhaps you could both visit Ridgefield soon. Father's addition came at the bottom. Congratulations. Will you be toning things down for the photos? I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar sting of their rejection. Instead, I felt clarity wash over me like cool water. Nothing had changed. All these years away, and they still saw me as something to fix, someone to approve under conditional terms. No tears came. Only decision. They want to meet you, I told Caleb that evening, passing him my tablet with the email displayed. To evaluate you, I should say. His eyes scanned the message, jaw tightening slightly at my father's question. And what do you want? He asked, setting the tablet aside. The pressure mounted over the following weeks. Mother called with suggestions about appropriate wedding attire, pale colors that wouldn't clash with my hair, which she still hoped would return to its natural state before the ceremony. Father emailed information about a photographer cousin who specialized in classic portraits that would stand the test of time. We'd be happy to contribute financially, Mother mentioned during our third call, her voice honeyed with control. Of course, that would mean accommodating certain family traditions. Traditions that had never included someone like me. When they requested we visit Connecticut so they could properly assess Caleb before the wedding, the thinly veiled judgment became impossible to ignore. They're treating this like you're applying for a position, I told Caleb, pacing our apartment. The suitable son-in-law interview. Caleb watched me move across the room, his expression steady. What do you want to do? He asked for the 3rd time that week. They'd pick apart everything about you, I continued. Your artist's hands, your tattoos, how you talk about your work. They'd smile politely while deciding you're not good enough. I can handle scrutiny, he said softly. But this isn't about me. This is your decision entirely. I stopped pacing, caught by the simplicity of his statement. My decision, not theirs. They've never seen me, I whispered. Not once in 31 years. Then maybe they don't deserve front row seats for the rest of your life, he suggested. The truth landed with stunning clarity. They wouldn't be invited. The realization didn't bring the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected years ago. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. This was self-protection, the final boundary I needed to draw around the life I'd built. I don't want them there, I said, the words bringing immediate relief. I don't want to spend our wedding day waiting for their approval or criticism. I don't want to scan the crowd for disapproving expressions or brace for comments about my appearance. Caleb crossed the room and took my hands. Then we'll build this day our way. Our wedding planning transformed from a minefield into a celebration. Instead of navigating family politics, we chose flowers based solely on what made us smile. Our venue, the rooftop garden of our favorite local restaurant, reflected us perfectly with its urban botanical charm. We designed a ceremony that honored our journey, readings from books that had shaped us, music that had carried us through difficult times, vows we wrote together over wine-fueled evenings. What about your parents? Stella asked during our weekly coffee date, her concern genuine. Will you regret not having them there? I've spent years regretting not having the parents I needed, I answered, surprising myself with the peace behind my words. I'm done with that now. My chosen family rallied around my decision with complete support. Marcus offered to walk me down the aisle. Stella became my planning partner, her organizational skills balancing my creative chaos. Caleb's parents called to tell me they were honored to welcome me officially into their family, tattoos, teal hair, and all. The wedding transformed from a potential battlefield into a symbol of liberation. Not a day marked by who was missing, but by who had chosen to be present. Not an occasion weighed down by obligation, but lifted by authentic connection. For the first time, I understood that family wasn't something you constantly auditioned for. It was something you built, choice by careful choice, with people who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. Our wedding would be the first day of that new creation. A celebration not of who we were pretending to be, but of who we had always been, beneath the expectations of others. Free. My name is Delaney Brooks, and today I marry the man who loves me exactly as I am. The converted warehouse overlooking the Willamette River glows with string lights that reflect off the water, creating constellations below to match the stars above. October in Portland brings a crisp breeze that carries the scent of fallen leaves and possibility through the open sliding doors. This space, once home to industrial machinery and corporate inventory, now cradles the most authentic celebration of my life. You ready? Mira asks, adjusting the final flower in my loose braid. Her hands, steady from years of tattooing alongside me, work with practiced precision. I turn to face the full-length mirror, propped against exposed brick. The woman staring back hardly resembles the girl who once hid sketchbooks under her mattress in Connecticut. My teal hair cascades over bare shoulders, and the silk of my open-backed gown reveals the spine tattoo I designed myself. My story. My skin. The words flow down my vertebrae in a script that resembles climbing vines. More than ready, I answer, running my fingers along the delicate beadwork at my waist. 31 years in the making. The music shifts, not the traditional wedding march my mother would have insisted upon, but an acoustic version of the song Caleb, and I dance to the night we met. My cue. I walk the aisle alone by choice. Not because there's no one to give me away, but because I've spent years reclaiming myself. The faces that turn to watch my approach belong to people who chose to be here, artists whose work hangs beside mine in galleries, clients whose skin carries my art, friends who held space for my transformation. Their eyes reflect approval that requires no performance, no pretense. Caleb waits beneath an installation of paper cranes and copper wire sculptures created by our artist friends. His eyes widen at the sight of me, and tears immediately form. This man, with his photographer's eye for beauty in unexpected places, sees me completely. You are everything, he whispers as I reach him, his voice breaking. Our officiant, Marcus, who runs the gallery where Caleb and I first exhibited together, smiles at the assembled guests. We gather today not to witness the beginning of a relationship, but to recognize a bond that already exists. This ceremony is a public declaration of a private devotion Delaney and Caleb have built through creativity, honesty, and the courage to be fully themselves. The vows we exchange contain no promises of obedience or servitude. Instead, we pledge acceptance of each other's evolution, authenticity in all seasons, and the freedom to create without judgment. I promise to never ask you to shrink yourself for my comfort, Caleb says, his voice steady now despite the tears tracking down his cheeks. Your wildness is why I fell in love with you. When I speak, my voice carries to the rafters without trembling. I promise to stand beside you, never behind you or before you. I choose you with open eyes and a full heart, not because you complete me, but because you celebrate my completeness. Laughter punctuates the ceremony, genuine and uninhibited. When I fumble the ring, nearly dropping it between the wooden slats beneath our feet, nobody gasps in horror. Instead, Marcus quips, artist's hands, precise with ink, clumsy with jewelry, and the crowd erupts in knowing chuckles. As we kiss to seal our vows, cheers erupt that seem to shake the industrial chandeliers overhead. I feel something settle in my chest, a certainty that has been building since I first stepped off that bus in San Francisco with nothing but determination and a portfolio. This is what belonging feels like. The reception flows naturally from the ceremony, the space transforming as Edison bulbs illuminate food stations featuring cuisine from our favorite local restaurants. No assigned seating, no stuffy dinner service where conversation dies beneath the weight of formality. People gather in fluid groups, plates balanced on knees, wine glasses clutched while gesturing to emphasize stories. Against one wall, Vince, a local tattoo artist who mentored me when I first moved to Portland, has set up a small station offering commemorative designs. Nothing elaborate, tiny symbols that guests can choose to mark this day. A line forms quickly, laughter erupting whenever someone winces at the first touch of the needle. Your father would collapse at the sight, jokes Amelia, my former art professor who drove up from San Francisco for the wedding. She gestures toward the tattoo station with her wine glass. That's partly why I love it, I admit, watching as Caleb's cousin receives a small geometric heart on her wrist. Though honestly, I stopped making decisions based on what would horrify my family years ago. The opposite wall showcases Caleb's photography, not wedding portraits or engagement photos, but his professional work. Urban landscapes of Portland, intimate portraits of artists in their studios, and a series he calls Reclamation, featuring people and their tattoos, each image paired with the story behind their body art. My portrait hangs in the center, back to the camera, spine tattoo fully visible, face turned just enough to show my profile illuminated by golden hour light. You've created something remarkable here, Marcus says, appearing at my elbow with a plate of appetizers, and I don't just mean marriage. I follow his gaze around the room, to the diverse group of people who form our chosen family, to the art that surrounds us, to the atmosphere of celebration unburdened by pretense. We wanted a wedding that felt true, I told him, not a performance. Mission accomplished, he says, squeezing my shoulder before drifting away to chat with other guests. As the night deepens, Caleb finds me near the dessert table and wraps his arms around my waist. How does it feel to be Mrs. Reed? He murmurs against my ear. I turn in his embrace, meeting his eyes. Actually, I'm still Delaney Brooks, and you're still Caleb Reed. Two whole people who chose each other. His smile widens. I wouldn't have it any other way. The celebration continues until the early morning hours. Nobody checks watches or slips away early with polite excuses. These people, artists, dreamers, truth-tellers, understand the value of moments like these. By the time Caleb and I leave for our small apartment in the Pearl District, my cheeks ache from smiling and my feet from dancing. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rings while Caleb and I sit at our kitchen island, sorting through wedding photos. The sound feels intrusive on a lazy Sunday morning, unexpected and unwelcome. Caleb rises first, padding barefoot to the door. I hear the familiar creak of it opening, followed by an unnatural silence that pulls me from my stool. When I reach the entryway, the past stands on our welcome mat. Father looks older, his shoulders slightly stooped beneath his tailored suit jacket. Mother clutches her handbag with white knuckles, her pearls exactly where they've always been. Behind them, Derek and Lucas hover awkwardly, neither meeting my eyes. Delaney, father says, my name sounding foreign on his tongue after so many years of silence. Caleb steps back to my side, his arm sliding protectively around my waist. The simple gold band on his finger catches the light. May we come in? Mother asks, her voice brittle with forced politeness. I hesitate only briefly before nodding. They file into our living room, these strangers who share my DNA, looking utterly out of place among our eclectic furniture and wall art. Why are you here? I ask when they've arranged themselves stiffly on our sofa and armchairs. Father clears his throat. We received this. He holds up a newspaper clipping, a feature on local weddings from the Oregonian that included a photo from our ceremony, through an acquaintance with Portland connections. Congratulations, Lucas offers weakly, earning a sharp glance from Father. We came to discuss your behavior, Father continues, as if Lucas hadn't spoken. Do you understand how humiliating it was to learn of your wedding from strangers? To have people asking us why we weren't there? Mother leans forward. The Hendersons' daughter saw it online. She asked Eleanor about it at her charity luncheon. She speaks as if this explains everything, as if social embarrassment justifies their sudden appearance after years of silence. Did you expect an invitation? I ask, genuine curiosity in my voice. We're your family, Mother says, as if the word alone carries irrefutable weight. Are you? Caleb asks quietly beside me. I squeeze his hand in gratitude. Do you know how embarrassing it is? Mother continues, her voice rising slightly. To have a daughter who looks like you? Who lives like this? Who excludes her own family from her wedding? The words hang in the air between us, crystallizing 30 years of conditional love into a single, clarifying moment. Thank you, I say, surprising everyone in the room, including myself. Excuse me. Father's eyebrows draw together. Thank you for confirming what I always knew. My voice remains steady, my hand still firmly in Caleb's. You're not upset about missing my wedding. You're upset that people know you missed it. I stand and Caleb rises with me. Together, we move toward the door, opening it in clear invitation for their departure. I have built a life surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be, I tell them, looking each family member in the eye. That's something worth celebrating. They leave with stiff backs and tight lips, no embraces or promises to keep in touch. The door closes on 30 years of conditional love, with a soft click that sounds like freedom. Caleb pulls me into his arms as their footsteps fade down the hallway. You okay? I press my forehead to his shoulder and breathe deeply. Yes, I say, and I mean it. I finally am. My tattoo needle hums against Parker's skin, a gentle vibration that connects us beyond words. She winces slightly as I trace the outline of a butterfly emerging from what looks like shattered glass, her first tattoo at 39. My mother told me tattoos were for people with no future as a doosack, Parker whispers as I pause to wipe away excess ink. I believed her for 20 years. I nod, understanding flowing between us like a current. Mine said they were for people with nothing to lose. And here we are. Parker laughs, the tension in her shoulders easing. Turns out they were wrong about a lot of things. 3 months have passed since my wedding. 3 months of waking up beside Caleb without that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if today would be the day I'd finally earn my family's approval. 3 months of processing through my sketchbooks and journals, pouring out decades of rejection onto pages that hold my pain without judgment. In my studio's quiet hours, I've created more than art. I've built understanding. Each brushstroke and journal entry has helped me recognize that what my family saw as rebellion was actually survival. My colored hair, my tattoos, my refusal to shrink myself, these weren't weapons wielded against them, but shields I crafted to protect myself. Almost done, I tell Parker, adding the final touches to her butterfly. How does it feel? Like freedom, she says, eyes welling. Like I'm finally allowed to exist in my own body. Her words crystallize something I've been feeling since opening Ember Ink Collective 6 weeks ago. What started as a solo studio has become a sanctuary for first-time clients like Parker, people healing from body shame, from families who taught them their bodies weren't truly theirs. I've transformed my understanding into purpose, creating a space where vulnerability is honored rather than exploited. The mint green walls, the comfortable chairs, the absence of mirrors except when necessary, every detail designed to say, you belong here, exactly as you are. There, I say, setting down my tools and gently cleaning the finished piece. Take a look. Parker's gasp of joy feeds something hungry in my soul. It's perfect, she whispers, touching the skin around her new tattoo reverently. It's exactly how I imagined it would feel. I know she's not just talking about the butterfly. Later that evening, after locking up the studio, my phone buzzes with a text from a number I still recognize, despite months of silence. Lucas. Can we talk? Coffee sometime? My hands tremble slightly as I show the message to Caleb across our kitchen table. He reaches for my fingers, studying them with his warm palm. What do you want to do? He asks, his voice neutral. Supportive without directing. I don't know, I admit, staring at those 7 simple words that somehow carry the weight of decades. Part of me wants to ignore it. Somehow. And the other part? I trace the wood grain of our table. Is curious. 3 days later, I'm sitting across from Lucas at a coffee shop equidistant between our homes, his in the suburbs, mine downtown. He's aged in ways that surprise me. Fine lines around his eyes that weren't there at Christmas 2 years ago, when he last stood silently by while our father made cutting remarks about my unfortunate lifestyle choices. You look good, Del, he says, using my childhood nickname cautiously, like testing ice on a frozen lake. Thanks, I reply, neither cold nor warm. Waiting. Lucas wraps his hands around his mug, knuckles whitening. Jenny's pregnant, he says finally. For months along. Congratulations. I offer, meaning it despite everything. It's making me think about things. About family. He looks up, meeting my eyes directly. About what kind I want to create. The ambient noise of the coffee shop fades as Lucas speaks words I never expected to hear. I'm sorry, he says, voice cracking slightly, for not standing up for you, for prioritizing Dad's approval over your feelings, for pretending not to see how much they hurt you. I sit perfectly still, afraid movement might break whatever spell has enabled this moment. Jenny and I have been talking about how we want to raise our kid, he continues, and I keep thinking about you. About how I never want my child to feel the way you must have felt, like you had to earn belonging. His apology isn't perfect. It doesn't erase years of complicity. But it's genuine. And I recognize the courage it took to reach across the chasm our family created. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, Lucas adds quickly. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand. And that I'd like to know my sister again. The real one. Not the version Dad wanted you to be. We talked for 2 hours. I established clear boundaries for any future relationship. No criticizing my appearance. No helpful suggestions about my career. No expectations that I'll ever conform to the Brooks family mold. I'm not seeking validation anymore, I tell him as we prepare to leave. I'm open to reconnection, but only on authentic terms. Lucas nods, understanding dawning in eyes that look remarkably like mine. I think that's fair. He hesitates before adding, Dad and Derek might never come around. I know, I say, surprised by how little that prospect hurts now. That's their choice to make. Walking home, I realize something profound has shifted. Reconciliation isn't about forgetting harm or pretending it never happened. It's about mutual respect and the courage to begin again differently. The wedding invitation arrives on a Tuesday in early spring, a cream-colored envelope with my cousin Emma's distinctive handwriting. Inside, beneath the formal request for my presence at her marriage to Thomas Wells, she's written a personal note. Delaney, I want you there exactly as you are, teal hair, tattoos, and all. You've always been braver than the rest of us. Love, Em. I trace the words with my fingertip, remembering Emma as the quiet cousin who always seemed to be watching, observing the family dynamics with thoughtful eyes. We were never close. She was younger, more compliant with family expectations, but her invitation feels like recognition. Are you going to go? Caleb asks that evening as we prepare dinner together, moving around our small kitchen in the synchronized dance of people who know each other's rhythms. I chop vegetables with precise strokes. I think so. The knife taps against the cutting board. Not for forgiveness. For closure. I'll be right beside you, he promises, kissing my temple. 2 months later, we arrive at the historic stone church where generations of my extended family have celebrated milestones. My hair is freshly dyed teal, vibrant against the simple elegance of my dress. Caleb's hand rests steadily against the small of my back as we enter. The reactions are exactly as I expected. Aunt Judith's eyes widen in shock before she quickly turns away. Uncle Robert greets me with stiff politeness, his gaze never quite meeting mine. My parents sit near the front, shoulders rigid, neither turning when whispers announce our arrival. But there are surprises too. Cousin Matthew embraces me warmly. About time you came back, he says with genuine pleasure. Emma herself rushes over in her pre-ceremony gown, hugging me fiercely. Thank you for coming, she whispers. It means everything. I realize then what this moment truly is. Not a battlefield or a proving ground, but simply a gathering of people connected by blood and history. Some will never accept me. Others might be trying to learn. The difference now is that neither reaction defines me. During the reception, I catch my mother watching me from across the room. For a moment, something like regret flashes across her face before she looks away. We don't speak, some bridges remain uncrossed. But Lucas introduces Jenny to me with pride in his voice. My sister, the artist, he says, and the title carries no mockery. Driving home that night, exhausted but peaceful, I rested my head against the passenger window. I don't need them to love me anymore, I tell Caleb, the revelation settling like a blessing. I'm no longer defined by their exclusion. The next morning in my journal, I write words that feel like coming full circle. Family isn't DNA, it's the people who never ask you to shrink. 6 months later, Ember Ink Collective has grown beyond my wildest dreams. What began as my private studio now houses 3 additional artists, each bringing their own healing journey to our collective work. The space has become more than a tattoo parlor. It's a community gathering place where art and acceptance intertwine. I've started mentoring younger artists facing family struggles similar to mine. 2 weeks ago, we established the Ember Scholarship for art students estranged from their families, funded by a portion of our studio profits. Sometimes, I marvel at the perfect symmetry of it all. Once rejected for being too different, I'm now celebrated for that very difference. The qualities my family tried to suppress have become my greatest strengths, my most valuable offerings to the world. This morning, a new client sits nervously in my consultation chair. She's in her 50s, recently divorced, hair freshly cut in a style her husband always forbade. I don't know if I'm brave enough for this, she confesses, showing me the small butterfly design she wants on her wrist. I smile, recognizing her courage for what it is. Have you ever had to choose between peace and approval? I ask gently. Her eyes meet mine, understanding blooming between us. Every day of my life, she answers. Then you're already brave enough, I tell her, preparing my tools for the work of transformation. Let's begin.